Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how are you doing this fine Friday morning as we are a little late to our normal recording time? Apologies for that. A couple of delays with my UCSD Tritons in the tournament yesterday. We almost had Michigan, but Dad, anyway, how are you doing?
All right, lots and lots of last-minute cramming. You know, I didn't actually finish my work until, 15 minutes ago, so we were both, burning the midnight oil, as it were, to get this done. Nothing like cramming the morning of the test.
Yep. I mean, if it works, it works. But anyway, we are here today with our first official post-free agency episode, I suppose you would call it. And we're full bore into the draft now, Dad. It is about a month and a few days away. So we're going to be all draft all the time, pretty much for the rest of until that day. We're going to be talking about, our favorite sleepers in the coming weeks. We're going to be talking about any news that comes out from pro days and stuff in the coming weeks. We got the NFL owners meeting, I believe, next week. So we'll be talking about anything Packers related out of that. Maybe the Packers tush push ban will be passed. Who knows? As well as a few other rules that are being proposed.
How much traction that re-announcement of something we already knew.
Yep.
And everybody's just like all over it again.
Yep, exactly. But anyway,
nobody's talking about how the Lions are trying to, make it easier
for them to commit
cheat
penalties
on defense.
Yeah, essentially they're like, oh, let's make the holding and illegal contact 5 yards and not an automatic first down. And it's like, well, why do you want to do that? It's like, is it because you led the league in those penalties last year, perhaps? But anyway, I digress. We are here today, since it's free agency and sort of an official, I would say we now know what the Packers roster looks like going into the draft, pretty much. Like, I guess we could see a Trey Hendrickson trade still, but that seems less and less likely every single day. But we pretty much know what the Packers are going to go into the draft looking like, what their needs are going to be going into the draft. And so seems like no better time then to do our first real on-air mock draft of the season. So both you and I came into this one. We both did 7-round mock drafts. I used PFF's mock draft simulator. You used Mock Draftable's mock draft simulator. So we got a little bit of different algorithms, we would say, giving us different player options, just to kind of look at what we think an ideal draft would look like from both of our perspectives. Mine, I'll talk about. Mine, I just wanted to see what it would look like if they did a certain thing in the first round, which, a little teaser there. But we both have our mock drafts here today, our first official ones. We've been doing mock draft Mondays on Blue Sky, so check those out as well, at Father Son Packer on Blue Sky. Also, subscribe, like, leave a review. I forgot to pitch all that stuff, but please do that as well. But so we each have a mock draft. We'll be going round by round, talking about the players that we picked, why we picked them, how we think it affects the Packers if they were to go in that direction. Before we do any of that, though, we do have a couple pieces of Packers news, Dad, and that is that we do have one more free agent signing. The Packers, snuck in there. Packers signed wide receiver McCole Hardman, previously for the Chiefs, 3-time Super Bowl winner. So that's something. It's going to be a 1-year deal. We don't have the official details yet. I would be surprised if it's more than like a minimum. It's going to be a very small contract.
Right, because last year's was also small. It was barely over the minimum, probably.
And he had been with the Jets and then traded to the Chiefs the year before that. So I think, to me, don't look at this like he's going to be a big contributor, is like my pitch to you. I think that this signing is going to be primarily, he's going to be a returner for the Packers. He's been a really good returner wherever he's been, whether that's punt return, kick return, mostly punt return. He's a better punt returner than kick returner. I think it's going to take some of the burden off Jaden Reed. I don't think they want their top receiver returning punts anymore, and he was only average at it last year anyways, but it's just putting him in, position to get hit hard more. So I think this is going to take some of the burden off him, take some of the burden off of Keyshawn. And I think this is also going to be a guy who maybe does some more of the motion stuff. They'll probably give him some gadget touches. He's fast. He's very fast, 4.33, but this is not downfield speed. He has never really had a high ADOT. All of his touches come at or behind the line of scrimmage. But Dad, what were your thoughts when they made this signing?
Yeah. So I took this is barely even a receiver signing in my mind. This is a special teams returner signing who can fill in here and there as a wide receiver when necessary. I think he's going to be down in Bo Melton territory in terms of number of wide receiver snaps. But he's probably going to take over both kick return and punt return responsibilities.
Yeah, I think that's going to be mostly his role, which is fine. They needed that, and this is a cheap signing, so like this is one of those signings where it's like, you know, low investment, and they're going to get something out of it probably. I think like, very high floor on his return skills. So like even if he doesn't take a snap on offense, I think it's still a fine signing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, because I think the investments, the cost is going to be low, so have practically no impact on the cap because it's. And he'll just return a touchdown in the Super Bowl for Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah, why not? Let's say you never know. It's not impossible. And then the other piece of Packers-related news are two draft-related items, two prospect-related items specifically. The first is that defensive end, edge rusher, Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M took an official visit to Green Bay.
He is the 10.00 RAS.
Yeah, so what you need, really ridiculously explosive, 10.00 RAS, but did not do the agilities. Like, so he's mostly like big linear athlete.
And we all know what that means.
Yeah, it means they probably wouldn't have been good. If they were going to be good, he would have done them. But very explosive, very large, very much in the mold of the athletes that the Packers like drafting in that position in the past. Now we'll see if they maybe change that up because it's yielded mixed results, we'll say. But they clearly have some interest in him. He goes in mock drafts from like, people like who have like NFL insider information anywhere from like 10th to 30th. So it's like he has a massive range right now in terms of where he could end up falling. Minimal production in terms of pass rush, in terms of sacks in college. Decent amount of pressures, but didn't really convert many of those to sacks. So there's some consternation about his, whether or not he would actually fix the pass rush problem. But anyway, so he visited with the Packers. And then the other piece of news was wide receiver Ted McMillan had a private workout where he, did his essentially testing, athletic testing, et cetera, did some individual drills. And Jordan Reed of ESPN reported that it was mostly scouts there, and there was one GM there, and it was Brian Gutekunst. So what are your thoughts when you heard that, Dad?
I was pleasantly surprised. And first, I was a little surprised he's the only GM, but I also like the fact that they're considering him seriously enough that Gutekunst was there in person.
I would be very excited if they ended up drafting him. And I think that it's interesting because I'm trying to remember the last time where like they showed like real like tangible interest in a first round receiver. Like I don't think they met with any of them the year that the one that I can remember is Ayuk. I remember that they were there was a lot of smoke around them and wanting Brandon Ayuk, and then the Niners jumped them.
And the Niners jumped in for it, and they also think we're interested in Jefferson that year.
Well, the Ayuk one worked out for the Packers because they ended up with Jordan Love. So like, cool things. The world works in mysterious ways. But there was rumors they were interested in Jefferson that year. So they're rumors, but it's interesting that they are seemingly very interested in Ted McMillan. I would be super down because I think he's very good. He's kind of like if you're not familiar with him, he's like, so the one thing though is, so he ran a 40 and it was, the reports were like 4.44, and then Daniel Jeremiah was like, yeah, that's not true at all. He was like, I talked to scouts and they had him anywhere from like a 4.52 to a 4.58. And he pointed out that like the last receiver to run that slow that went in the first round was Mike Evans. Like other than that, these receivers that run in the 4.5s almost never go in the first round.
So you're telling me he's Mike Evans?
He has Mike Evans qualities. Like in terms of like, also, he's huge. He's massive.
6'4", 219.
Yeah, he's very big. He's got really good body control for his size. I think he's fast enough. I think hitting 4.55 is like, you check the box enough. If he had ran in like the 4.6s, you might be like, oh, like that's a little. But 4.55, I think is fine. But anyway, they have some interest in Ted McMillan is the point of that news story. But Dad, we have a lot to talk about. So should we just get into our pseudo dueling mock drafts? I guess we'll say. Right. And let's start it out with first round pick. Who you got?
Okay, should I go first?
Yeah, go first. So we did 7 rounds each. I don't have as many picks as you, and we'll talk about that in a second. But first round, Packers on the clock, 23rd overall pick. Whatever the jingle is.
Who they play?
Yeah.
So I used mock draft database because we talk about the consensus rankings, and so I decided to use them. I do a lot in PFF as well, but I find you get very different players when you use different sites, and because they have different rankings. And I try to do multiple sites because you get into the trap of, oh, that guy's never going to be available because you never ever get him if you only do the same site all the time. So then I still am fighting that feeling. It's like, how did I get this guy? I should be able to get him. But speaking of guys, you think you might not be able to get after the testing, Shamar Stewart is who I got at pick number 23 in the first round, from edge rusher from Texas A&M, consensus rank of 13th, and he's only 21 years old now. 10 RAS, elite in every measurement for defensive ends except for weight at the combine, but he didn't do any agilities. As I said, it really seems like a goody guy physically, 6'5", 267 with 34 and an 1/8 inch arms. He's dropped to the weights as the Senior Bowl, between the Senior Bowl and the Combine. He has 281 at the Senior Bowl and down to 267 at the Combine. The average edge rusher drafted under Gutekunst, 6'4" and a quarter, 268 pounds, with a 9.36 RAS and 34 and a quarter inch arms. So they're like right on with Stewart. He fits their profile to a T. And as you mentioned, he just visited Lambeau, so the Packers are definitely showing interest as well. Now, the downside, he has not proven real pass rush productivity at an elite level. Among qualifying edges, he was 78th in the class of 2025 in PFF's pass rush productivity and 80th in win percentage. He has done a little better in true pass sets, however, 38th and 54th in pass rush productivity and win percentage. So that's a little bit better. But his career, he only has 6 sacks on 680 pass rush snaps. That's not so great. Now, he did have some good reps at the Senior Bowl, especially in some of the team drills where he's, winning with speed off the edge or showing a little bit more juice in the pass rush game. So hopefully it comes down more to the role they wanted him to do at Texas A&M than what he really can do. If the Packers end up picking him, if he goes to the Lions or the Bears or the Vikings or something like that, then that's
terrible.
I might have a different. I might have a different take.
He is such a polarizing prospect because I don't know if you saw after they announced that Stewart met with the Packers, it was a war.
There must have been a flurry
online
of eyeball emojis.
No, it was just a war online between people being like, there was a bunch of comments where it was like, I prefer pass rushers who like can actually rush the passer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was very reminiscent of the Gary conversations when he was drafted. And there's some similarities. Between insane athlete, not a lot of production, top tier school, massive for their edge for an edge rusher.
It's just right in line with Gary, Van Ness, and Stewart. I think that's why people have strong feelings about him joining the Packers, because that hasn't always worked out.
And then it got people were posting well, here are all the people who had crazy production in college, in terms of sacks. They didn't all most of them didn't work out. And if
you only pick that without some traits, then
ideally you're getting both. But in terms of Stewart, I think, in terms of approach, just taking, let's say, I think the argument for Stewart makes sense if you think he's going to be a good pass rusher, because I think we've all agreed ultimately what the Packers need more than anything is pass rush. And we can talk about, the Packers needs before free agency and after free agency. To me, I feel like the Packers didn't really address any of their needs in free agency, unless you feel like corner is I didn't think corner was that big a need, but
just because they're able to get by.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway,
so I went pass rush because though some of the players I might have taken instead, like Harmon and Kenneth Graham and Mike Green.
Yeah, Mike Green, Izraku. Although he might have been there still.
Maybe Ezraku was there. Green was not. And neither was Harmon or Graham. So I wanted to try to add something to the pass. This is a little bit more of a prediction what I think Gutekunst would do if given this pick, rather than necessarily my favorite pick.
And that's what we were talking about with when they met with us. This is the exact type of guy that they love. in terms of like crazy traits, really good size. Who cares about the production? Like that
Yeah.
they don't care at all about that stuff.
So my draft is a little bit of a mix of what I think Gutekunst would do and what I would do as we go along.
Yeah, I mean, you try and be as predictive as you want, but you can sprinkle in your own preferences.
Oh, I mean, you could take it either way. It's like, okay, this is what I think they should do, and this is what I think they will do.
Yeah, and mine
And I've
is
done
almost
both of those kinds of drafts.
and mine, just to move over to who I'm taking in the first round, mine is more of a what if they did this? And I don't necessarily think it's something that they would do because I don't think it's really ever been in their, repertoire to make these kinds of trade ups for skill position players. But I was curious as to how the draft would shake out if they did this. So my first round pick, I actually traded up. I traded 123 and their fifth round pick, that's the 159th overall pick, to Tampa Bay to move up to 119. And I selected wide receiver Matthew Golden. And I did this not because I necessarily think this is something they would do. I'm still actually a bit split on Golden as a prospect. I feel like my comp for him is like a Terry McLaurin type, where like the speed is crazy. Like he ran a 4.29. Most people agree he doesn't look that fast when he's playing. And it was kind of the same for Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin ran in like the 4.3s, and everyone was like, oh, that's like a really good time for him. I didn't expect him to run that fast. But super smooth, very athletic, really good hands. Had some awesome moments down the stretch for Texas. The overall season was a bit up and down, so let's talk about him a little bit. He's 5'11", 191, so he is a bit on the small side for what the Packers would like. And so I'm not surprised that they're more interested in McMillan than they are, they would be more interested in a McMillan type. So if McMillan had been there, I would have traded up for him as well. But in this scenario, Golden was the receiver there. And I wanted to see what it would look like if they took a receiver in the first round. But so he's 5'11", 191. For reference, Reed was 5'11", 195. And a lot of people considered him being maybe too small for Green Bay. And so this would be a smaller receiver for them. Like I mentioned, he kind of reminds me of Terry McLaurin, very smooth route runner, good at winning in the intermediate parts of the field, really good feel for the position, really good in and out of his breaks. The question for him is tape versus production. The stats are only okay. Of the 18 receivers in 2024 per PFF that ran as many routes as him, he ranked 15th of those in yards per route run. So not great in yards per route run, which is generally a pretty sticky metric, and a lot of people enjoy using that one. However, of the 106 receivers who had as many targets as him, he did rank 4th in yards per target, which, pretty good. So when they were throwing him the ball, he did a pretty good job like with those targets. And he was middle of the pack in drop rate, 56. So, that's fine. He was 20th in contested catch rate, though. So he's, decent when, at the catch point is not bad at all. So that's like top 20th percentile. So that's good. And he ended the season really strong. I mentioned that in yards per route run, he didn't have a great year. He had 3.8, though, yards per route run versus 2.1 over the course of the season in the final 4 games so that was the postseason. That was their conference championship game and then the playoff games that they had in the college football playoff. So in the biggest games of the season, they went to him more, and he really performed in those games. So I think that is an interesting data point. In the games where they had to win, in the downs where they had to have it, specifically against Arizona State, they threw him the ball, and he was their go-to guy. Honestly, like I mentioned, I'm not even totally sold that the Packers would be interested in him, but he's one of, I think, the 2 guys in this class where I think they could come in and fight to be the Packers wide receiver 1, and that's McMillan and Golden. I don't think any of the other guys could come in and be a number 1 right away. And to me, at that point, I'm like, well, then what do they really add to the offense in terms of as a first round pick? And so
here's a guy I feel like I sometimes put in the same bucket, though maybe it's a little bit different style. And wonder what you think. Him compared to, say, Luther Burden. Got a similar range in the draft.
Burden to me is not enough of a route runner, and he's more of a slot guy. Golden plays some in the slot, but the majority of snaps are outside. Burden to me is like a yak guy. He's kind of like a Deebo Samuel variant, clone, whatever you want to call him. I just don't think he's necessarily what this offense needs.
He may be more redundant with Reed than Golden is. Then
exactly
what you're thinking.
And I get the arguments well, if you go Golden, you got 2 smaller guys out there, and you're getting small fast. And so maybe that's something where it's okay, can we have 2 5'11", 190 guys? How is our run blocking going to be with 2 small guys out there? That's definitely a valid question.
I think it'd be tough to have both out at the same time.
Yeah, but and that's a fair argument. But I just think that they need a little bit more dynamism as route runners. I think overall his like yards per route run versus man weren't great this year, but overall his yards per route run in general wasn't great. But like I mentioned, yards per target was great. His contested catch numbers were pretty good. He gets open on tape. He's got a lot of wiggle in and out of his breaks. But yeah, I just think that he's the type of player that I think would be interesting. Now, the real reason I did this in this mock draft is I wanted to see what the rest of the draft would look like if they took a receiver first overall. And I do have concerns that if they take a receiver first overall, there's just not enough ways to improve the pass rush. And so I think what I ultimately came around to is like, man, like, I don't know if they can afford to do that. And unless, like we mentioned earlier, it's like just really betting on Lucas Van Ness. And betting on Lucas Van Ness with, honestly, like, what has he shown you to this point where you can really feel like he's going to put it together in year 3?
Well, I guess the last, 4 to 6 games of the year, he did better than he had earlier. Well, not at an elite level, but it was improving. It wasn't like second to last in the league like he was the previous year and for the first half of last year, but there was some improvement towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
So that's, if you want to hang your hat on something that give you hope for Lucas Van Ness, that would be it. And then a new coach for the group. So, but I think if that's your only plan, then you're taking a big risk.
Exactly.
But I do like this exercise of, well, let's see what happens if I pick this position first, and then how does the draft fall? Where do I get, hung out to dry in a group if I follow a certain pattern? And I think that's probably the front offices must do this. Like, okay, if we are trying to get better at a couple of different positions, what's the best order to do them in?
Exactly. And it's like, but the counter argument to what I was saying earlier is like, you're not going to get a wide receiver 1 later either. And so it's like, what do you really need? And so
well, I have a slight disagreement then with my next pick, though I don't think he'll be available. And this is a guy you might have to trade up for the second pick in the draft. I picked him here with my next pick in the second round, though I suspect he's going to go early in the second round, and you'd have to trade up to get him.
Yeah. So what would your second round pick?
This is the wide receiver that I took, and that's Jaden Higgins from Iowa State with pick 54. I suspect he's going to go in the 30s, and that the Packers will have
He's moving up draft
up.
boards quickly. Quickly.
But on the consensus board, he's still only 64th, and he's 22 and 2 months old right now. So not an old prospect. I feel like, along with possible top 10 pick McMillan, he's the best fit of all the wide receivers this year for what the Packers look for and need. What I think is an outside X receiver. Yeah, with a combination of size, speed, and productivity. He has a 9.92 RAS, and he's 6'4" and 214 pounds. He is elite in his 40 time and his vertical and broad jump, though he didn't do any agility testing.
Size and speed. The Packers love it.
Size, speed, and explosion.
Mm-hmm.
So if you compare him to what Goody has drafted, the average receiver is 6'1.5" and 204 pounds. If you take out the slot players, then like Reed, Amari Rogers, and I'm going back to Cobb if you're counting players who have played while Gutekunst has been the GM. Then it's 6'2 3/4" and 209 pounds, which is awfully close to what Higgins is doing.
Mm-hmm.
His player profile has him as 76th percentile dominator, 85th percentile target share, and 71st percentile breakout age. So, and in terms of his production, his last 2 years, 983 yards 2 years ago and 1,183 yards last year.
Yeah.
71% of his snaps are outside, so he's an outside receiver predominantly. Was sixth amongst all qualifying wide receivers in 2025 in PFF receiving grade. 58% contested catch, only a 2.2% drop rate.
Yeah, and that's definitely something where it's like, that's one of the things I look at most when I'm looking at receivers. Like, if you're dropping the ball a lot, we can't.
Let's compare him to Packers last year. Wicks 18%, Reed 14.5%, Dobbs 9.4%, Watson 6.5%.
So, did you see that? I think I saw a stat recently. It was like the Packers receivers, and we've hammered this point to death, but the Packers receivers are overall like have the what was it, the most drops by a receiving core, or tied for the most drops by a receiving core ever, in terms of they had 25, yeah, or like in their database, or like the last 15 years, something like that. It was crazy.
Yeah, and he was also 4th in the class in total first downs.
Yeah, and I think my main question with him is he's been a big riser since his performance at the combine. And, the more I actually did see someone arguing the other day that they thought he should be, ahead of McMillan, even was their argument. They had him. This person had golden wide receiver 1, who has also recently Daniel Jeremiah and Mel Kiper both had golden over McMillan in their most recent mock drafts, which is just something to keep in mind. But anyway,
I've heard people kind of start arguing that right after the combine. It's like, maybe you should be wide receiver 1.
Yeah, and I think that I don't want to over-index to the 4.29, but he is impressive. And then I will say, with Higgins, I think he's almost rising up too much to that. He's, I think, on draft day itself, not going to be there in those 50s. Could you talk yourself into trading up for him?
Yeah, what I think the Packers will have to do, and I'd be open to, is trying to trade back up to like the first couple picks in the second round to get him. Maybe that's not even going to be enough. Maybe he's going to go at the end of the first. That might be a little rich, but maybe it's not. I mean, if every other team is willing to pick him in the late 20s, then maybe that's the pick. Maybe that's the first round pick, which then changes everything I do about pass rush. But I would be willing, so one thing I've done a lot is like trade back like 5 or 6 picks in the first round, get a little capital to then trade back up in the second to try to get Higgins in like the mid 30s. So trade back to like 28 or 29 or 30, and then trade back up into the mid to late 30s if Higgins is still available. That I would be kind of on board with that as a strategy. Especially if you've got like multiple like D tackles and edge rushers you like as pass rushers. If you have, say, Harmon, Graham, Pierce, Ezeraku, all available.
Yeah, and going over to my side of the thing, going over to my second round pick, it comes around to if they take a receiver in the first round, are they able to fix the pass rush? Well, with my second pick, I took Braden Swinson, who's probably my favorite of the second round pass rushers, but to me is probably going to be your third edge rusher, fourth edge rusher. And to be fair, it's hard to have any one come in and be like, okay, immediately you need to be like the top edge rusher on the team, lead the league and lead the team in pressures, lead the team in sacks. That's not necessarily realistic, but Braden Swinson, just to talk about him a little bit.
So you don't think we're going to get Andre Carter in the second round?
Yeah, Abdul Carter, but yes.
Abdul Carter.
Yeah, and productive. But Braden Swinson, productive edge rusher in the SEC, 6'4", 255, 33 plus inch arms, so he's long. He's pretty explosive. He didn't actually test outside of agilities. He was 66th percentile in the 3-cone, 70th percentile in the short shuttle, but pretty good speed to power, good bend for his size. Per Brett Coleman, he was second in the class in pass rush win rate amongst edge rushers in true pass sets, and then had 9 sacks and 60 pressures last year in the SEC. So against great competition as well.
90 sacks would be quite the year.
No, yeah, I mean. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, overall, good pass rusher. I think would be a great second round pick either way. But the whole argument that I have trouble with is like, okay, but you need an edge rusher to come in and contribute right away more than you need a receiver to come in and contribute right away. And so like looking at this through the like lens of like, oh, what if they took a receiver in the first round? I don't know if you can help your defense enough, but I do like Braden Swinson a lot. I would like him in the second round, maybe either way, no matter who they took in the first round. I like him and Birch out of Oregon as well as possible second round edge guys. But productive edge rusher in the SEC, long arms, big frame, type of guy that the Packers would like. I'm interested in seeing like if he ends up testing it all more before the actual day of the draft, because right now we don't really have many other measurements for him, but he looks explosive on tape at least, which whatever that's worth. But he's a guy that I would be interested with for the Packers, but at the same time I don't think he does enough to fix your edge problem, and I don't know if there is anyone in outside of the first round that does enough to fix your edge problem right now. And so in this scenario it's like, please Lucas Van Ness develop, please Gary have a bounce back year, etc.
Yeah, there are a couple of flyers who might help the pass rush. A little bit later, like another one would be like David Walker much later, but they're all kind of risk guys who might or might not pan out. And so, which my overall strategy has been for the first 3 picks, especially after they signed offensive line depth and a corner, it's like D tackle, interior pass rush, edge pass rush, and wide receiver is what I want to see with the first 3 picks of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough.
So
it's going to be
strategy.
Hard for the Pack. That's one of my issues with the Packers. I don't hate the Packers free agency, but it's just like free agency is for addressing needs, so you don't feel like you have to go a certain way in the draft. And I get that there weren't really that many edge rushers available, and there weren't that many top level receivers available, and so in some ways you're a victim to just like what the free agency class looked like. But I don't think you can fit all the needs, that the Packers have in this draft, and come out of it feeling like really good about filling all the holes that they have without a lot of internal development. And they're going to be leaning on that internal development. But anyway, moving on to the 3rd round, who do you have the Packers taking?
Right. So here I went with what my other of what I see as the 3 top needs is the interior defensive lineman. I went with TJ Sanders at pick 87, his consensus rank of 65, and he's only 21 and a half years old. He has a 9.26 RAS. His weight is up to 297. He was 284 at the Senior Bowl, and now he was up to 297 at the Combine. He had elite 40 time, and 20-yard and 10-yard splits, elite vertical jump and broad. So explosive. Agilities are above average, but not great. So they're okay. He's maybe a little bit more of, you think like a pass rusher on the inside, like Wyatt and Wooden and some of those guys are not an all around D tackle like Kenny Clark has been, and what you're hoping to get somebody in the future for. He was 6th amongst all qualifying 2020 class of 2025 defensive tackles in PFF pass rush grade, but only 58th in run defense grade, 14th in pass rush win percentage, and 4th in pass rush productivity out of 200 players at the D tackle position. So, a little pass rush productivity, a little bit more bonus if you get a sack, more impactful pressure. Though his run stop rate is not that bad. It's top 20 percentile at 8.8%. So it wasn't terrible. Not elite, but not as bad as his overall run grade. So there might be a little bit of something there. So I picked him as a guy who could give a little bit more pass rush.
The question is that the type of D tackle they need?
Well, I know.
I see your next pick.
I've doubled up.
Exactly.
I'm trying to cover all the bases, but unfortunately, I didn't think there was a player left who could do everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of the nature of the beast when you're picking on day 2, late day 2, like day 3 guys. And
I think the guys who could do everything, I think Harmon and Graham.
Yeah. I like Harmon
and maybe Darius Alexander.
And but he's so old that I'm like almost scared off of that. Anyways, like 25 years old, which younger than me. So what can I say? But anyway, he needs to have his foot in the boot like these. Exactly. Yeah, half in the grave. But anyway, the thing with drafting a pass rushing only D tackle, I just feel like they have those on the roster already. Like, they have a Wyatt, they have Brooks. Like, I just don't see, like, and so, like, I think the ideal, like, if he works out, he's as good as, like, Brooks or, like, Wyatt, in my opinion, right? Like,
if he works out, I think he's as good as Wyatt. I think if he works out, he's better than Brooks, and essentially maybe replace Wooden on the roster.
Yeah, but like Wooden doesn't even really play that much. Like, anyways, I guess it's like my thought there. But I see what you're saying. Like the team needs more pass rush, and so you can say it's like, well, we already have these like pass rushing D tackles. It's like, okay, well, where were they last year then? Like, if we have these pass rushing D tackles, which is like a fair argument.
Maybe they're
just not that good.
The idea of them is more than we
And,
I think they really are.
Brooks was just much better his rookie year, in my opinion, than his second year. And so maybe he
down,
can get
maybe
back
that
to
was the change
form.
in scheme.
Yeah, maybe, sophomore slumps are real. Like that happens. Like that's not unheard of.
I've been meaning to do a deep dive on, if you have a sophomore slump, how often do you come back up out of it? Is that just, who you are from, they figured out, it's like in baseball, like, oh, we discovered you can't hit a curveball, down the way and you'll swing it every time. We've found your weakness, and if you can't correct for it, then that's just, they figured it out. So has he been figured out? Has he already, reached peak, or will he improve? And I've been wanting to look at how often does it actually happen that after, going down in the second year, that a player comes back up to what they were the rookie year or even better? Or do they drop down the second year and then that's it?
It's how often is it a sophomore slump, and how often is it this is who they really are? Yeah. And it's it's a fair question. For me, in my third round pick here, I still think that even after adding Aaron Banks, the Packers do need a little more offensive line depth. And so I went with Wyatt Milam out of West Virginia. I just think, he's the kind of tackle to guard convert, a bit of positional flexibility that the Packers generally love. The question for me for picking him, I just thought he was the best available player here. I didn't love any of the tackles that were available. I almost went with Belton, but I just don't know if he was the one I thought about. But I went with Milam. 6'6.5", 313 pounds, only 32-inch arms, so he does provide some positional flexibility, but with that arm length, he's probably more of a guard. But we know they love, their positional flexibility. 9.14 relative athletic score at guard, a really good vertical and broad jump and three cone. 8.01 RAS at tackle, so still a pretty good athlete at tackle. Also, per Brett Coleman, on true drop back pass sets, so like not like RPOs, not play action, not stuff like that. He ranked third amongst tackles in this class in pressure rate allowed. So he was very successful while at West Virginia as a tackle. Did some guard at the Senior Bowl, did pretty well there, despite being, relatively new to the position. Had some losses, got beat by, lost one tackle rep to Ezeraku, where Ezeraku just ragdolled him, and I was like, oh, that's tough. But anyway, it's the Senior Bowl. You're not going to be perfect at their practices. But I just think, some additional depth along the offensive line. And so what are your thoughts on this? Because I think after we saw the Eagles game, they need more depth along the offensive line. Is it, if you draft two more guys, are you just waving the white flag on Monk and Glover? Like, or is it just like, hey, these guys need to have some competition because we can't just like blindly go with them next year?
I expect them to draft two more, and that's just good process. You already know. Drafting two more is not necessarily waving the white flag. It's recognizing that we don't know if they're good enough yet. And so we can't just sit and wait another year to find out if they're good enough yet without having a backup plan. So I'm. And plus they've got three guys on expiring contracts.
Yeah. Well,
so it's time to.
We assume Tom
is
getting a massive extension. But yeah. And I don't know what they're going to do with Walker.
Or Ryan.
I feel confident what they're going to do with Ryan. No offense to Ryan, but I just think he's the type of guy. He's like fine. He's an average starting guard, but we've seen Runyon, an average starting guard. They just let him walk. Myers, average to below average starting center. They just let him walk. Like they'll let these interior guys leave. Like I don't think that they care that much about that.
I suspect they'll let the market decide.
Yeah, and with the way the interior offensive line market is going, I can imagine which way that's going to go. But anyway, so I went with Milam. I think that he's provides some versatility. They need some depth along the interior still. It doesn't really, the one issue is it doesn't really help with their tackle depth, which I think is still a question mark, but that's I just like Milam the best of the players that were there. But who do you have any thoughts on Milam, or do you want to go to your fourth round guy?
I think there's people out there who like Milam, so I have not looked at him that much, but fourth round is often where I pick up, start looking for offensive tackles, though I didn't do it this time. Like fourth and fifth, I'll sometimes pick up two of them. And there are a few that I like. I think I like the idea of getting one around there, though this time I decided to do more to the defense. Since I went for more of a pass rushing D tackle, I went to a big, giant run stuffer that we've talked about before. Jamari Caldwell here at pick 124. 6'2", 322 pounds. Consensus rank 120th. I don't know his age, though. He entered college in 2022. 2 years at Houston and 1 year at Oregon. And so I wanted to add a big body D tackle since Sanders is kind of under 300 pounds.
And Caldwell's a guy that we really liked out of the Senior Bowl. Now, the testing was bad.
The testing was not good.
Problem. The testing was not good. That's like the one red flag. It's like, oh, wow, I did not expect him to test that badly. We talked about in our combine rises and fallers that was like, oh, that's disappointing.
Yeah, so we'll see if anything comes out of his pro day in terms of, because he hasn't even done any agilities, and I think or in one of the jumps as well. But I feel like he's more of a replacement for Slayton than anything. Who was their primary run defensive D tackle.
Yeah.
He's not nearly the athlete Slayton was coming out of college. I mean, so Caldwell's RAS so far is only 3.41.
Yeah, and Slayton's was like high.
And he still hasn't done the agilities or broad jump. And Slayton was 8.08.
Okay, low 8.
So his RAS is a little bit more similar to Jonathan Ford's than Slayton's. Ford was draftee in the threes.
Yeah.
But I think he's got a lot more juice than
He's got more
Ford.
pop than Ford does. Yeah, or Ford does.
Out of 200 qualifiers in the class of 2025, he is 50th in pass rush win rate. And in true pass sets, he was win percentage, he was 28th best. So doing better there.
Yeah.
And he looked really good in the Senior Bowl one-on-ones.
He looked like damn near unblockable in the Senior Bowl one-on-ones. Like they had a really hard time with him.
I think he's, the fourth round, I guess we got Slayton in the fifth, but having somebody who could at least do some run plugging and maybe add a little pass rush is something that hasn't been addressed by either the team or me in this draft so far.
Yeah, and I just have a question. So I think one of the, under-discussed things is Slayton going out the door to Cincinnati. Packers' run defense was really good last year. Yeah. Like, really good. One of the few teams to bottle up Saquon Barkley in the playoffs, like mostly held him down for the entire game until like one big run at the end. For the most part, held most run defenses down. I think you could argue outside of like maybe a Lions game here and there, but like for the most part, mostly held good run games to inefficient days on the ground. Are you concerned at all losing Slayton that run defense is going to regress?
It could be because the other D tackles are not good run defenders. Wyatt's never been very good, and Kenny Clark has gotten worse like every year.
They need him to bounce back so badly. They need him to play like anything. Yeah,
productivity and grades have declined. I think each of over the last 4 years versus when he was elite the first 3 years of his career. He is not that anymore.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why I think that they need to find another, run stuffing D tackle. Thankfully, you can usually find those guys on day 3.
There are some other guys who have, I think, less pass rush potential, even though Caldwell didn't test as such. He seemed to show some on tape. But there are some like pure run pluggers out there, and some have some athletic ability as well. Get late in the draft, and so if I did pick him here, I probably would have picked one of those guys, like 6th or 7th round.
Yeah, exactly. For me, for my next round guy, for the 4th round, this is kind of a product of like how I was approaching this draft. Is like, hey, if you took a receiver in the 1st round, what do you have to do? What does the rest of the draft look like? And I think if you did do that, which we know it's on the table because they showed some interest in McMillan. In this instance, we took Golden. But I think in that case, you need to take multiple swings at edge rusher. And so I took Oluwafemi Oladejo here, who's another tradesy edge rusher out of UCLA. He's young to the position. He had mostly been an off-ball linebacker until this past year. But this past year, had a good year, 33 pressures, 7 sacks in 12 games. So, averaging almost 3 pressures a game. That's pretty dang good. 6'3", 259, 33.5-inch arms. So he's really long for the position, got good size, a little short, but still got good strength, good weight, good size, had a nice Senior Bowl. And he's really athletic as well. 36.5-inch vert and a 10-foot broad jump. Really explosive. He didn't do any other testing besides that, so we don't know what, 40, 10-yard split agilities look like. But you watch him at the Senior Bowl, and for a guy who has not been playing the position that long, I thought he did a pretty good job, in terms of showing out in that event against guys who are more experienced than him, against top-level competition. And I would not hate at all, a day 3 bet on a guy with really good traits and, just get him into that room and just see what happens. And so I think if you don't go edge rusher early, you need to take at least 2 of them and just have a battle because I think that's like what's putting we've talked about it a million times. That's what's putting a cap on this team right now is the lack of pass rush juice they showed last year. And so you need to fix that. And if you don't try and address that in the first round, I think you need to be taking multiple swings at it. And if you end up with too many good guys where, you don't have enough players to play there, that's a good problem to have. So anyway, but yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about why we think, even though the defense overall was good, to get off the field at the end of the game,
couldn't do it.
You need to basically get after the quarterback.
Yeah.
And that's something that the Packers were not good at last year.
No, they were terrible.
For a couple of years.
Yeah, we talked about it. It's like they had
They did it like twice out of 9.
10. Yeah, 9 or 10 times they were able to. And it was like against the Colts and the Titans or something like that. It was like two, like
the Colts and the Rams.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Colts and Rams.
Something like that.
Because I do remember that because it was Evan Williams forcing the pass breakup on Higbee, I think it was, across the middle of the field. And then the Colts one was, the Colts just, they are what they are. Come on now. But anyway, they need more pass rush. And Brian Goodkins talked about that, situational stuff. They need to be able to get off the field. And he pretty much talked about it, that the pass rush wasn't good enough. I hope that they're not, like we've talked about, I hope they're not just banking on the coaching. But anyway, they need more edge rushers. But Dad, who did you take in your next round? Any more help along the defensive line, or did you go in a different direction?
So I went in a different direction here in the 5th round. I've been looking for a corner who fits the kind of the thresholds for the Packers in the late rounds. Okay. And I went with a safety corner. It depends on which site you're looking at, whether they list him as a safety corner. Caleb Brainsaw out of Tulane. Consensus rank of 149. He's listed as both. Yeah, he's listed corner safety. He meets Green Bay's size thresholds at 5'11", 3/8, and 197 pounds. Now, the last 2 years, he's mostly played in the slot. So that's, not exactly, I think, what we're looking for. But he did play primarily in the slot his first year as a starter in college. Now, last year was at Tulane. The first 2 years were at Troy. So down a little. Not a little bit highest level.
Yeah.
He's an elite athlete, 9.96 RAS, 4.33 speed, plus elite vertical jump and broad jump, like 40-inch vert and 10-foot 9-inch broad.
Yeah, almost damn near 11-foot broad jump, which is insane.
He didn't do the agilities, but at least he's a good straight line and explosive athlete. He had a good enough size. Now, he's a good tackler and good in run defense, but he only had one good year in coverage, really, in terms of his grading. And that was when he was at Troy. So that's why some places have him switching over to safety rather than sticking at corner. So this is a little bit of a flyer, that whether he can turn into a decent corner with some coaching.
Yeah,
he has the size and athletic traits they're looking for.
And they could use some more depth at corner. I was surprised that they let Ballantyne go.
Yeah,
I was surprised they didn't seem to have much interest in bringing him back. Now, Jair Alexander's still on the team. I think we both agree. He's not going to be on the team week 1.
You know what? The longer it goes, the more I'm in favor of keeping him. Not
Really?
that I think it's likely to happen. Yeah, just like why not just keep him?
It's expensive and he never plays. But what are you going to use that money for? I guess it's the alternate, argument. I mean, it seems like the fact that all the reporting from Domofsky is they have not approached him about a pay cut. He won't take a pay cut. Those are, from both sides.
Yeah, and there was that Jair and his agents are supposedly surprised that nothing's happened yet.
Yeah, they are surprised that he has not been moved. It seems like he hasn't asked for a trade, but all the tea leaves are he wants a trade.
I don't expect him to be on the team. I just think, this might actually be better for the team if he's on it next year.
Okay, so
unless it's really contentious.
It seems a little contentious already, doesn't it?
Yes.
So and
when they basically said that, it's almost like they accused him of being soft, which is like the kiss of death.
I don't think they accused him of being soft. I think it's just
that he's just not out there. And are you really hurt enough to not be out there? Or why don't you stick it out a little bit? Seemed to be what they're saying.
That's not how I read it at all. I think they just read it as, what I think it was is so this kind of goes all the way back to, I almost wonder if it's more, they wanted him to get surgery and he didn't want to get it. And it's similar to the Zadarius Smith thing. And the reason I think that is twofold. You know, he had a pretty major shoulder injury, but I remember back in, 2020, the 2020-2021 season in the NFC Championship game, Jair Alexander broke his thumb. And there was talk that offseason about him not wanting to get surgery on his thumb. And I just wonder if with all the injuries he's had, you know, it was a meniscus. No, MCL this year? Meniscus?
PCL.
PCL, you're right. PCL. And he ended up having to get surgery to get it fixed, right? If I remember correctly.
I think after the season, he eventually got surgery on it.
And I wonder if when it first happened, they were like, look, if you get surgery on it now, like we could have you back for the playoffs. And he's like, well, I want to try and rehab it. And which, like, that's his prerogative. Like, it's his body. It's fair enough. But I wonder if that maybe caused some frustration. Not obviously just, you know, just guessing. Doesn't actually, nothing, none of what I said is actually like informed in any way. I'm just wondering about that because you're right. Some of the talk around, you know, his availability did seem a little bit weird from like, you know, the Packers side of things, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Sometimes it's hard to go back from that.
Yeah. And so I don't think he's going to be there. But anyway, that's all to say that they are going to need to, yeah, and he did end up getting, you know, arthroscopic knee surgery in December. So that was actually reported. Yeah. But anyway, so they're going to need more corner depth. I didn't end up
depth. I don't think they need a starter. So
no, you don't pay Hobbs to come in and not start.
Right. Once they signed Hobbs, I stopped picking corners in like the second and third round.
Yeah, and there was talk
depth later,
which is interesting because you know the most recent Daniel Jeremiah first round mock draft had them taking Maxwell Hairston, and the argument was like, "Oh, Jair's not going to be there." It's like, yeah, well, that's why they signed Nate Hobbs. Like they're going to start Keyshawn and him. Yeah,
most of like that's the whole second half of the year he wasn't there last year.
Exactly.
And I don't think the way he wrote it, I don't think this was information. I think this was speculation, and Hairston is below their size threshold.
Yeah,
they like don't have anybody.
It would definitely be, and you know, sometimes they do that, but they of the NFL teams they stick to their thresholds more than most of them. But anyway, my next pick.
The only they've had one player that Gutekunst has added as a free agent or as a draft pick under 190 pounds, under 191 pounds, and that's Sean Charles.
Yeah, and not like it worked out very well. So it's like,
and I don't think that's going to encourage them.
And he was a slot only guy. Like I guess actually they did end up playing him a little more outside as time went on. But my next pick, this was more about I just think they're going to really like this player and not necessarily like I think it's Dante Thornton Jr., receiver out of Tennessee. I just think he's the type of guy that they're not going to be able to keep their hands off of, especially with Christian Watson missing probably the majority of the year with that ACL surgery. Size, speed, just absolute freak in nature. And he reminds me a lot of MVS. And I know MVS is a bit of a controversial player. And during his time in Green Bay, because of the issues he had with drops, he was still very valuable. And there's a reason speed is really important to NFL offenses. It's like shooting in basketball. You need the spacing. But Dante Thornton Jr., 9.8 relative athletic score, a 4.340 at 6'4.5 is absurd. Add on to that a 10'8" broad jump. Didn't have a great vertical, which is actually very similar to Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
This guy's like an MVS clone.
He's an MVS clone, but a little less thin. He's like a little heavier. 3.7 yards per route run this year, which is insane, and a 16.5 average depth of target. So like pretty much a deep threat only at Tennessee. In an MVS role, I don't think he's quite as stiff as MVS. He's a little bit better of a route runner, a little bit bigger in terms of just weight. I think he's just the type of receiver the Packers like on day 3. And so he's the guy I'm keeping my eye on. And they need the speed. They just don't have any downfield threat right now. Dobbs isn't really that in terms of he just doesn't have quite the speed needed for it. McCole Hardman has the speed, but he's never been that in his career. He's a behind the line guy. Jaden Reed, I mean, he could do it, but then you're using your best receiver for clear out routes. So like, could be Bo Melton, but he doesn't really have the size.
Or Wicks, even though he doesn't have the speed.
Wicks doesn't have the speed. Bo Melton doesn't really have like the size to be like, okay, throw it downfield to him. He's going to go win something. Like they're going to miss Watson next year. It's kind of like what I'm coming around to. Like that is going to be a tangible loss on the offense. You're going to feel that in the passing game. So
I was not aware of this. I had not looked that much at late round receivers, and I had missed Dante Thornton. But, there was this contingent, and I was kind of on this train a little bit. It's just like, if they need a deep threat to open up the field, why not sign MVS? Maybe the Packers are like, we got MVS in the draft.
Yeah, and I think my argument for the longest time is like they don't need more role players on offense in the receiver roles. The only argument is they need a deep threat. Now like I said, you could maybe pigeonhole some of these other guys into. You could kind of bend their roles into that. They're just not ideal fits to be deep threats. None of the guys they currently have on the roster. And so if they were to take a receiver late, it would be like a downfield specialist. And so I think Thornton's a good fit. But anyway, who's the next guy on your list, Dad?
So moving on to my 6th round pick. Now I'm finally getting to an offensive tackle. And that's Jack Nelson from Wisconsin. Consensus rank 194. I don't know his age, though. He initially enrolled in Wisconsin in January of 2020. He hasn't done any testing yet. But his overall performance looks like worth taking a flyer on. I don't know when I don't think the Badgers have had their pro day yet. He's 6'7", 314 with 33.5-inch arms. So he's got the build to play tackle. He's a little taller than Green Bay's usual preference, however. It's like 6'4", 6'5" for like all of their offensive linemen.
Yeah, but they'll take a Josh Nijman. They'll take they'll go with a Caleb Jones.
Late. So they're just like 6 rounds, like if it's 6th, 7th round or UDFA. And he's a better pass blocker than run blocker right now. Elite PFF pass blocking grade, 17th among 179 qualifying offensive tackles in 2025 class. 16th in pass blocking efficiency. Slightly lower run blocking grade, but still 32nd in the country. So this is a guy I think it maybe satisfy people like it's a Wisconsin player, but I think he's got some potential. I wish there was a little testing on him, but assume he'll do stuff for the pro day since he's done nothing so far.
Yeah, and like we mentioned, I think 1 to 2 different offensive linemen in this draft is definitely it lines up. And also, I forgot you have one more pick than me, so I think you're not actually on your 6th round yet.
Yeah, so I've got an extra lineman, I think, compared to what. Somewhere compared to what you've got. I've got 2 key tackles.
And that's another thing is like they don't have a lot of picks in this draft. So I think that makes a trade up less likely. Unless,
and Gutekunst said like, says like, you don't have many picks.
Yeah,
I don't
have that many picks yet. Yeah. So I think a trade down might even be more likely. For me, the next player that I took, just as we kind of speed things up here at the end, is a guy I think we both like is Teddy Buchanan out of Cal. Really athletic linebacker with just like, he's big enough is the thing. He's 6'2", 233, a 9.62 relative athletic score, 40-inch vert, 10-foot broad, 4.640. Amongst linebackers with at least 75 tackles made per PFF, he had the 7th lowest missed tackle rate in the nation. So that's like out of like 1,000 linebackers. Actually, with at least 75 tackles, that's probably more like 200, 300 linebackers, but the 7th lowest missed tackle rate. So he doesn't miss tackles. He's really athletic. He's a good mover, good, pretty fluid hips. And I just think that they need another linebacker. They brought back McDuffie, which is good. I think they needed, at least a depth piece there. But Eric Wilson, which we failed to mention before, signed with the Vikings. So he's back with the Vikings. And so the Packers have Quay Walker going to last year of his deal. Edgerrin Cooper, who we're all really excited about. Isaiah McDuffie re-signed, which, solid. They need another piece. Tyron Hopper, big question mark. Yeah, just a big question mark. We don't know. But they just need another body. And, worst case scenario, I think he's a good special teamer with his athleticism and his tackling ability. So that's why I'm going with him. I know you're high on him as well, right?
Oh, I picked him a lot because I do think there's a decent chance the Packers will take a late round linebacker, essentially in the mold of Isaiah McDuffie, Ty Summers, and some of these guys with like some athletic traits, fill in as a depth piece and special teams. And I think Buchanan has a lot of what they're looking for. And I've got another guy that I discovered in this particular draft that I hadn't seen before that I'll get to. But my next pick is I'm sticking to the offensive line still. And it's not a tackle this time, but not a guard who they don't pick, but they do sometimes pick centers.
Sometimes.
And that's Drew Kendall and he's from Boston College.
Okay.
His
maybe a
consensus rank is pretty low.
Inside information from Halfley is what you're thinking?
Right. His consensus rank is lower than I'd expect at 314. Now I'm picking him at 237, but his biggest selling point here, he's had the second best short shuttle for all offensive linemen in the combine at 4.51. Close, but not quite at that 4.47 cutoff where you have a really good chance of success.
Yeah.
But still, that's kind of what I'm going with here. He's 6'4" and a quarter, 308 pounds. So basically exactly on the Packers' average offensive lineman, and a RAS of 9.09.
Didn't do the jumps, but
didn't do the jumps. And not good at the bench, but elite speed and elite agilities. And
yeah,
the one con is he's exclusively played center in his career, so he has not yet shown positional versatility.
And like not just sub 33-inch arms, sub 32-inch arms. Like that,
yes.
And the fact that he had a bad bench like reps at that short of arms is a little bit scary. But
so maybe he's hit the weight room a little bit.
Hit the weight room a little bit, yeah. Get big.
But he was 26 out of 270 interior offensive linemen in all of the FBS in 2025 class in pass block efficiency, and also 24th in run blocking grade. So it just feels like a great value at the end of the draft where they going for, a elite mover in the offensive line, kind of player they like.
Bet on athletes.
I suspect he's not going to be a road grader at 308 pounds and short arms. And
my question is,
bench.
This is definitely a move. I would say like, oh yeah, this is a guy that they're going to like. I mean, Monk was small too, I guess, so maybe not. But I'm just thinking, is like when you look at their interior offensive line now, it's huge.
They're full of giants.
Like it's all massive individuals. I mean, you have Banks 325, Elton like 315. Ryan's big. Morgan is big. Like they seem to be going even bigger at interior offensive line than they used to. And I think some of that's maybe in response to like what the Eagles look like, what the Lions look like. But I don't know. It's just something that I've kind of noticed is like and it's not just the Packers. Linemen around the league are getting bigger than they've ever been. So it's just something I'm kind of noting.
Yeah. So maybe this philosophy is already out of date with the Packers.
Yeah, but they did just do it with Monk last year.
Movers.
Monk was not that big. Monk was like 305, I think.
Monk was 308.
Yeah.
Ryan was 321.
Yeah. Ryan's big. Morgan's like 325, I think. Banks is 325. Like they went big. They're going big along the offensive line. No, I don't hate it. My final guy, and then you have one more. My final guy is another D tackle. Like we mentioned, I think they just need D tackle help, and I didn't find one I really liked until the end here. Thor Griffith out of Louisville. No official measurements yet, but listed at 6'2", 320. So we'll see if he actually is that big. If he's smaller, I don't know if they would go with him. But 88.4 run defense grade last year, which was first. 12.4% pass rush win rate, which was fourth amongst the tackles with enough snaps. Just a solid player. More of a run defender. I think could play maybe a little nose tackle. And I just think that they need, some more help inside with Slayton going on and just some more just competition in that room. But that was my thought there. But anyway, I don't have a whole lot more to say about him. These 7th round picks, which we get through them quick. But anyway, who's your final guy, Dad?
So I went to the linebacker that we talked about. This guy I really just discovered in this draft that's Sean Dolak from Buffalo. He's a little on the smaller side, so only 6 foot and a quarter and weighing 221. A consensus rank of 303, but an elite athlete with an 877 RAS, so that's dragged down a bit by his size, is elite in the 40 and in the 10-yard split, elite in the broad jump, elite in the vertical, elite in the short shuttle, and elite in the 3-cone. So basically, he's a good athlete in everything he's testing at. Elite in the bench as well, just a little small for the position. Even by modern standards, though closer in weight to kind of your typical All-Pro now, which is like 230. And the Packers' average linebackers are like 234. He had the top defensive grade in PFF for all linebackers in the 2025 class at 91.9. And elite across the board in run defense, tackling, pass rush, and coverage. He had the 10th lowest missed tackle rate in all of FBS. Anybody had at least 190 snaps. That's 252 players. Only 5% missed tackle rate.
Yeah.
So kind of similar in many ways to...
and he's just... The one thing with him is he's just really small.
Yep.
And the question is, like, would he be able to hang at that size? And in the 7th round, that's a bet you're willing to make. Because other than that, he's got everything you want. He's just kind of very small for the position.
He's got short arms and he's smaller. So, but elite in a lot of ways, and he's shown to tackle at least, but that is a lower level. The Buffalo is not as low level as, say, Troy or...
Because the thing is, at 6'2", 220, he's almost a safety, right? Like,
yes, he could play safety. He's
that's almost
kind of like
safety
Tariq
size.
Carpenter size.
Exactly. Which, and they took Tariq Carpenter, and Tariq Carpenter hung around for a little while, but.
And there's an idea is like, could he bounce back and forth between safety and linebacker?
And then he didn't want to play linebacker, right? If I remember correctly, that was like a
he
big
might not
thing.
have. Yeah, he was 230. He's actually a little bigger, taller, and heavier.
Yeah. If we picked a safety that was bigger than this line, yeah. But so that's the thing with Dueling is like he's small, but maybe it wouldn't matter. But anyway, wrapping things up here, I think what we really come down to, just to the main message of this, they need to probably go, in my opinion. You can let me know if you disagree with me. If they're going first round pick, they need a pass rusher or like a top level wide receiver. And to get a top level wide receiver, they probably have to trade up. If they go top level wide receiver, it would be hard for them to fix the pass rush externally. It would pretty much be banking entirely on internal growth and then maybe a couple of role player guys. And hey, maybe you get lucky with a second round, third round pass rusher. Right. But when you look at the best pass rushers in the league, outside of Max Crosby, all these guys are first round picks. Like Garrett, first round pick. Bosa, first round pick. Watt. I mean, everyone knows first round pick. We get it.
I was like, you sure he was a first rounder?
Micah Parsons, first round pick. Down and down the list. I'm sure there are some that I'm forgetting that like maybe Montez Sweat, first round pick. I mean, Danielle Hunter was a late round pick. Will Anderson, first round pick, top 5 pick. Danielle Hunter was another late round guy. Like you sometimes can get lucky on these traitsy guys in the late rounds, but I think as time goes on, teams are kind of wising up to like, hey, we'll just bet on traits. Like the production doesn't matter as much, which was the deal with Hunter. And so that's why you're going to see guys like Shamar Stewart go in the first round, is because it's worth the like risk there. But so I think
it may be the position that is most heavily weighted to first round to get a star than any other position.
And so that kind of does bring back to us like, hey, like I would love for them to trade up for a Tet McMillan, but I don't know if you can fix the pass rush if you do that. And so I'm kind of like, after doing this exercise, like I think they just have to go pass rusher in the first round. It's kind of what I come around to. And, maybe there's some receivers that are available later if they do that. Maybe there aren't. Maybe they just have to roll with what they got. And I just think that, that they might not be able to fill all their needs in this draft. Is kind of what I come around to.
The pass rusher who might be available in the second round, who could fix the problem if he straightens it all out?
Who?
Pierce.
Yeah,
he looks good. He's a little lighter than the Packers like, but he's really good and gets the run and as a pass rusher on tape.
Yeah,
and if he falls,
because it's like there's
right now
about like off the field stuff, or not off the field, like more just like he's kind of a knucklehead. It sounds like, I don't know, like just like there are question marks around him, like not on the field, I guess. So he's not in a lot of first.
He's
round
a guy
mocks.
who, if it works out, and that you get him in the second round.
Yeah,
it might really work out.
Yeah, and so
but as long as it doesn't like turn into a
Ja'Kai Polite situation, where it's just like, oh, this just doesn't work at all. Oh man, yeah. But anyway, thankfully we dodged that one. But anyway,
I was picking him as some.
Oh yeah, I mean he was mocked to the Packers at like 11 that year a lot, or 13, I guess, whatever they were picking that year. But anyway, this has been the Father Son Packers podcast. I think coming away from it, I think they need to go edge rusher early or D tackle if it's Harmon. Harmon's like the only one that I would like be like, they can go D tackle just because I think he's that good. I think he should be a top 15 pick, like lock. I think that they need offensive line depth on day 3. They probably need. They might need multiple like edge rush picks, honestly, even if they go first round. So we'll see. But anyway, let us know what you think. Do you think these mocks are good? Do you think my mock is better? Do you think his mock is better? I'm leaning towards his, if we're being honest. But what do you think about Shamar Stewart as a first round pick?
Experimental. See what happens if I do this kind of.
Mine was like that.
Mine was a little bit more straight.
Mine was like that indie album that's really experimental and is trying to do new things, but maybe doesn't really. Maybe it isn't great. Yours is like that classic rock, like people know what they like. But
stop
anyway,
like tying silverware to the piano strings and seeing what noise comes out.
We'll see what happens. But anyway. This has been the Father Son Packers podcast. Thank you again so much for listening. We know we're going a little long, so we'll wrap things up here. But if you like what you heard, subscribe, leave a review, tell a friend, leave a comment. We'll be doing an episode every single week throughout the offseason, so keep it tuned here. Check out @Father Son Packer on Blue Sky for updates on when things are coming out and updates to Packers, related news. We'll be talking about, top 30 visits, who's coming to visit the Packers. But anyway, thank you again so much for listening. We'll be back next week, I think, with probably our late round gems that we like. But anyway, thank you again, and until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.